bit already, so we're partially warmed up. So why the 535 IS? Well, I've been wanting one of these for a few years. I didn't have an E28, but I've had two E12s, two E34s, an E39, and an E60 5 Series. And a lot of people say the E28 is one of the best ones that BMW ever made, and one of the most just long-lived, well-built, solid platforms. Just a great all-around car. Now maybe the M5 is probably the ultimate, but for me, I always wanted the 535 IS. They only made these in 87 and 88. 88 being the last year of the E28, and this one's an 88. It's also a California car from New Southern California, its whole life there. I live in Minnesota, and it's 100% rust free. I did not want a car with rust. I did not want to have to deal with that. I've dealt with that on other cars I've had, and it's a nightmare. So I started, and I also wanted a red car. I wanted this color Zinno, which is the German way of saying, I believe it's Cinnabar red, with a black interior. So it's a lot of qualifications. Dry climate, California preferred, a car that hadn't been smacked up in a crash or collision with body panels replaced, a 87 or an 88 535 IS 5-speed with the red with black interior. So that's a lot of things to want, and it took me a couple of years to find this one. Some other cars came up here and there that didn't quite meet my criteria, but I'm glad I waited. The driving feel of this car is just, I think analog is an overused term in a lot of car videos these days, but it really is just a different feel. I mean, it definitely feels like it's 32 years old in some respects, and in other respects, you can't believe they got it this right back then. Well, and it looks like we've got the motorcycle gang out for a drive today. So am I happy with this car? I am very happy that I found it. It's a keeper. I've watched a lot of Bring a Trailer auctions, a lot of car classifieds on mye28.com, which, by the way, is the best resource for the E28 if you're looking for a place to look for parts, look for tech advice, look for conversation, look for cars for sale. That's the place to be. I looked on Craigslist, and the values of these are coming up. If any of you have seen the Hoovies Garage video of the E28 535i that he drove, people are starting to look for these. I remember 10, 15 years ago, these were down around $5,000 for a nice one, for a 535 IS 5-speed, a California car, and it just was not too hard to find them. Now, everybody's out there looking for them. I mean, the M5s are just at a crazy price level and unattainable for a lot of people. But even a regular E28, a 535, let alone a 535 IS, I mean, you're talking $10,000, $15,000 for a decent car. And then if you're like me, you want to make it your own, you want to go out and do some modifications, European bumpers, different seating, different European lights. I mean, it really adds up, and that's if you can find the parts. It's becoming so difficult to find these parts. Just my soapbox here. BMW Classic is not making it easy. They have a lot of price increases over the years, sometimes multiple price increases compounding on each other in the same year. They've turned their parts business for classic cars into a profit center for the company. And you used to be able to get stuff for very, very reasonable prices 10 years ago, no longer. So running and operating one of these is expensive. Finding the parts that you want for any kind of upgrades and modifications are becoming fewer and further between. And then, like I said, finding a good car, finding a car that's rust-free, is a desirable specification with a manual transmission that hasn't been in collision and patched together, good ownership history, and preferably low miles. This car is not low miles, so that's probably the area I did have to compromise. This car has 227,000 miles on it, and you know what? It still feels tight. It still feels great, and that's a testament to why these E28 5 Series are so desirable. Car moves. I mean, I'm not going to go challenge the new BMW 340i by any means, but it's not a slow car. I don't feel like I'm in people's way driving along with modern traffic, and it has a pretty nice power to weight ratio. These E28s are right around 3,000 pounds, plus or minus 100 depending on the model probably. But this motor is really a nice match to this chassis, this M30 B35 with the bigger valve head at 208 horsepower stock, and it feels like it. It feels like it wants to pull, and it's no slouch. Really nice day here in Minnesota, springtime. A lot of people out. Hopefully no one will get in our way this time to enjoy some of the twisty turns here. It's by no means a California twisty road in the mountains, but it's what we have here in Minnesota. That was a drive in my 1988 BMW 535 IS. I think we covered most of it. I'm going to do a walk around, and after I park here, and go through the modifications and some of the other details of this car. But I think that was a pretty good ride, and hopefully you enjoyed it and got an idea of what it's like to drive one of these. Alright, we've driven it. Now let's talk about it more in depth. As I mentioned, the 535 IS has an M30 B35 engine swap. It also has aftermarket suspension comprised of H&R springs, Bilstein Sports, and Ireland Engineering sway bars. Other Ireland Engineering upgrades that it has is their E28 big brake kit, and it also has their exhaust. When I got the car, it had the European bumpers done as well. It did not have the air dam on there, It had a different interior. I'm going to show a picture of what the interior and the exterior looked like when I first got the car. And what I did was, Chris Kohler is a respected member of the My E28 message board and a well-known guy. He has a very impressive E28 collection and some other cars. And I joked that I sent this car to Chris for finishing school. So we got this car out of Southern California, as I said in the driving video, and we sent it to Chris, and I had him work on the upgrades that I wanted. The air dam was pretty difficult to find. Chris had some sources, and it took a while. It had been cracked up a little bit and needed to be repaired and refinished before paint. The early European valance that goes underneath the air dam had to be sourced from BMW. This car also had the larger European headlights on there when I got it, but it didn't have the yellow versions, and it didn't have the yellow fogs, and it also didn't have the headlight cleaning system. I really have a thing for these old headlight cleaning systems. I think they're so cool, and I told Chris that I really wanted that. The car also had different wheels. It had some BBS replica 17-inch wheels, and we put on these BBS RZs that are staggered. They're 8.5 in the rear, 7.5 inches in the front, with 225 rear tires and 205 front tires, 16-inch. Really nice setup. I really like it. We had the centers repainted and the gold finish that they came in, kind of that classic 80s BBS BMW look with the gold centers and then the red. We're going to start at the back. Not a lot to show here other than my vanity tag that I like here in Minnesota, the reference to the Zinno paint color. I've left the badges on. Sometimes I do take the badges off my cars, but right now I've left them on. We'll see if I ever get this thing repainted, what I decide to do. You can get a little bit of a peek at the Ireland Engineering exhaust under there. Paint might look good in these videos and this sunlight, but it is faded in some spots. You may notice that as we go around the car. I really like the lip on the rear wheel on these BBS RZs. I mean, it's not as pronounced as BBS RS, which I also love, but it's got some depth to it and some presence. I really like these wheels. This car does have all the original glass in it too, which is something you don't really think about when you're buying a car, but with a car of this age, I can just say that it is nice to know that, you know, it hasn't been broken into. You're not going to take the back seat out and find out that the window is broken and there's glass shards underneath the cushion. I've had that on previous cars, and also that the glass is original and not kind of aftermarket, not as maybe high quality as the original glass. Let's take a look inside at the Recaro seats that I talked about. So here's a shot of the interior. These blue buttons on the Recaros control these bladders that you can inflate in the back of the seats. So you push one of those buttons and they inflate, and then you can let the air out of the bladders by pushing on the blue buttons. There's 3 different bladders on the back of the seat. They also are heated, which is really nice, especially because I live in Minnesota. It was something I didn't know that these things had, but was a nice bonus when I got these seats. The steering wheel, when this car came to me, it had a different steering wheel that it's not one of my favorites in the E28, so I wanted to replace that with the M-Tech steering wheel. And we sourced this, and it needed to be recovered, which was exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to have it recovered with the red stitching and also make it a little bit of a thicker rim. So this really has a nice thick rim to grab onto. It's not quite as thick as maybe a modern M car, but it's not real thin like the original ones. Here's a shot of the mileage of the car. As I think I said, 227,000. And what else can I point out here? Oh, little thing, but I did want to source the European mirror with the map lights. So this has the passenger and driver side map lights. I think I have to have the key on to have them turn on, but kind of a cool little extra bonus feature. Car has a crack-free dash, which is nice as well. Wouldn't have been the end of the world for me if it had a cracked dash, but it is nice that it doesn't have one. Let's open the hood and take a look. A couple of things to point out here: the different intake from the M30 B35. On the left, the reservoirs are different because we have to have the reservoir for the headlight cleaning system. This car, I fitted a Ron Davis aluminum racing radiator in there, so that's not stock. And then also the Racing Dynamics strut brace, more like engine jewelry, but I like it. When we got this car, it needed some other TLC under the hood here. Chris did a nice job buttoning up some things. So the AC doesn't work yet. I need to get that working, but he did reroute the AC lines. They were routed kind of precariously in the engine bay. The air cleaner box was kind of flopping around and wasn't anchored in there the right way. There's a part from an E28 635 CSI that fits with the later 6 Series that had the M30 B35. And then just probably a whole host of things that I'm forgetting. I mean, Chris did extensive work on the suspension of this car to get things right. The shocks were installed upside down in the front. There were issues with the threads on the upper shock mounts, and the bolts that were holding them in were cross-threaded. It was bad. The rear subframe, or not the rear sway bar mounts were torn out, and those had to be re-welded into this car. So there was a lot of work that Chris did, and I'm just impressed as hell and can't stop looking at it, and I'm really happy that I have this car. The front of the car is, I gotta say, by far my favorite. It just came out so amazingly. I don't know what else to say. I can't stop looking at it. The BBS air dam is a favorite of mine. The fog lights and the high beams and the low beams all were sourced as new old stock parts, so never been put on a car. Perfectly clear glass, no pitting, no grunge from being used. I mean, it's just getting to be nearly impossible to find this stuff anymore on eBay or other car message boards. I did put clear Laminex film on the lights and the fog lights, not the turn signals, but all those new old stock lights I wanted to protect. So it's clear film just to protect against road debris. But the bulbs in all of them, the bulbs in the low beams are yellow. The high beams, I believe, are yellow reflectors and then just a regular bulb. And then the fog lights are the same, where there's a yellow reflector inside and a regular bulb. For those of you that are out there looking for one of these, and I mentioned in the driving video, they're harder to find. Just finding the car is difficult, as I said, and the prices have gone up. But then sourcing all these parts, and people ask, well, what's it going to cost to change everything over to Euro bumpers, and I want to do this drivetrain swap and this and those European parts. It's hard to find the parts. BMW frequently won't sell them to you unless you have a European VIN, and then finding someone who's competent and knows how these cars go together and can put it together for you correctly is quite a challenge, and it's not going to come cheap. So I'm really happy to have this, and I'm really lucky that all this stuff came together in this package. There honestly isn't much else that I want to do to this car. I may repaint it at some point. If I do that, I may redo the headliner and do a black Alcantara headliner, or I may just leave it. I mean, not having any rust, there's not really a reason to touch it, and the paint, even though it's faded in a few areas, it's honest. It's a 227,000 mile car, And then the only other thing that I'd like to maybe get working is the air conditioning. I have a small fuel leak right now back by the fuel pump that I need to get fixed, but that's kind of old car issues that you just have to deal with. So that's it. That completes the overview of this car, the driving, and I'm gonna sign things off with some drive-by videos from outside the car.